Hello friends, how are you? My name is Ari Thurger and today I'm going to scratch the surface of animism. One of my patrons, Mr. Curtis Harold, asked me to talk about the importance of the tribe and the tribal spiritual perspectives in the construction of worldviews that led to the concept of the divine and subsequently to the construction of religions. So I thought it would be useful to speak a bit about animism, which not only is the basis for any religious construction, but it's a growing subject in the formation of neo-pagan movements with a tribal focus, with a focus on family structures and relations. Thus, animism serves as the basis of the reconstruction of the pagan mentalities and cultures from the historical periods before the conversion to Christianity, involving both religious, social and ethical aspects, as well as the customs and worldviews of the tribal peoples of the past. But before we start this video, I think it's very important to understand the term animism. Animism is an academic term created to help describing the traditional spirituality, religious beliefs that everything has a soul. Animism is considered to be the root of every religion, but this term alone greatly diminishes the actual early spiritual perceptions of the past. Animism, or rather the basic notions of spirituality, is the belief that through a network of spiritual entities everything is connected, and communication with the spiritual reality is possible through the awareness of that connection. And this means humanity, once upon a time, was aware that our well-being was intimately tied with the land itself. Our well-being didn't just depend on taking advantage of the natural resources to ensure survival, but it also depended on a mutual spiritual relationship with the spiritual entities of the land itself. This is crucial to understand what animism is all about. It's about the fact that humans are a fundamental element of nature. Without the human component or its awareness of the spiritual reality, there is neither physical nor spiritual balance with the network. If a link is broken, the entire foundations of what surrounds us falls down. There is the need to be in contact or in concordance with the rest of the spiritual entities. Otherwise, there is great suffering in the environment we inhabit. A relationship between humans and nature spirits, is needed and must be preserved. We must take care of the land so it can take care of us. If that relationship is broken, we suffer, and when we suffer, we are vulnerable to more suffering. Once we had this perception of being connected with the land, and this was the basis of spiritualities with a world-accepting view, that is, a perception that this world matters and everything living in it, and we are an important component in the relationship every spiritual entity has to contribute to the well-being of the land and to give continuation to life itself. When we progressively started to construct our own religions in which praising divine entities was more important than taking care of the relationship with the spiritual, we started to walk a dangerous path that would lead to terrible suffering. When we started to live our lives more preoccupied with an afterlife and its supreme divine entity, we started to act solely to please that divine entity and to gain access to that afterlife. We started to conduct all our efforts into saving our soul, to live eternally in some place beyond our reality, and so we started to be individualistic, solely concerned with having a life elsewhere. We have built world-denying views because this world started to be unimportant. What was important was the life after this world. So we stopped caring about this world and about the relationship with the network of spiritual entities. And here we are today, polluting the world, massively destroying it, because our collective consciousness changed into a panorama more concerned with the life after death in some other plane. This selfish religious perception led us to unconsciously disregard the world around us, and we began to use it solely for our well-being without giving anything in return. We created a virus that consumes nature and as such we consume ourselves. We have manipulated the land and we have established supremacy over the land because we have put our individualism on top of every relationship. In fact, there is no relationship in individualism except, of course, a relationship with ourselves alone. And that's why animism is an important perception within the tribe. Mutual help. Every member of the community is needed for the well-being of the community. It's not about one single individual, but the importance of each individual in a broader panorama. The tribe is the representation of the network of spiritual entities in a smaller scale. This sense of reciprocal spiritual relationship amongst the tribe and with the land itself is the basis of paganism. Paganism without the human construction of deities that represent the hierarchical structure of a society. Paganism in the sense of being a role-accepting view. Paganism isn't about worshipping many gods or simply just being some religion outside the three main Near Eastern monotheisms. No. The basis of paganism is animism. Therefore, what makes spirituality pagan in nature is having role-accepting views and a sense of relationship of mutual help between the human component and the spiritual. And now we may start to speak about animism. If we talk about animism in an academic sense, with an anthropological and archaeological approach, animism is the belief that everything possesses a soul. That is also applied to non-living objects and natural phenomena that also have a soul and therefore possess supernatural or magical power. Animism is the belief that personal spiritual beings and impersonal spiritual forces have power over us, and we are aware of such forces that influence us, and as such we also possess the power to manipulate those powers, those forces. As I have said in other videos, in ancient cultures, the relationship with the spiritual world was maintained through the continuous acts of offering and receiving. People offered all sorts of objects to the gods, land spirits, ancestors, well, the general spiritual reality. People were not offering the objects. What they were offering was the spiritual entity residing in the objects. For instance, a person would create pottery or forge a weapon, and those objects would contain the spiritual essence of the person, part of the soul of the person which was imbued in the object. Our mind, strength, vitality, our will and everything non-physical that defines us would be placed in the object that was offered to the spirits. This is why the material culture was highly important in ancient pagan societies. Objects didn't have the same importance they have today. Now we are concerned with the usefulness of the object or just the brand, and we seldom use any actual object in religious purposes. In the past, objects were important in a spiritual perspective because they contained the essence of the soul, part of ourselves, which is why in many ancient burials a lot of the material culture was buried with people. This is also part of paganism, the importance of the material, the objects, what is real, what is made by us in this world and can be offered to the spirits that cannot make physical things of their own. People offered their own essence placed within the objects. This is animism. Everything has spiritual essence and or spiritual entity. And now I'm going to tell you something, and you will never look at ancient statues the same way again. Just a quick example so you might understand how the animistic spiritual perception goes. There is a reason why many ancient statues are missing a nose or arms. The likely scenario is that because such parts of a statue, of a human figure, are much more ample, much more external than the rest of the volume of the body, they are easily broken due to the elements or carelessness from the part of archaeologists, which happens. I've broken a few things. But this is a short-sighted view only focused on the rational. To ancient societies, animism was still present in their religions, which means if objects contained a soul, and therefore have supernatural and magical power, a spiritual entity could also inhabit a statue. In fact, the earliest creations of statues, of wooden anthropomorphic figures or little animal totems, well, some material that contains a clear representation of a living thing, was precisely so that the spirit of that thing could live in the object made to resemble its image. Contacting with the objects was contacting with the spiritual entity living in it. People were not worshipping the image, they were worshipping the spiritual entity living in it. So, ancient statues are missing limbs because they were purposely broken. The left arm was to give, to offer, and the right arm was to receive in turn. If the statue loses its limbs, the spiritual entity can no longer act through the statue, can no longer receive or give. People from outside a specific culture would break the limbs of the statues of another culture to stop it from offering and receiving blessings. Statues serve to have the spiritual entity, be that divine, land spirit or ancestor, serve to have it on the physical world to act in a physical way. But how do you kill the statue? How do you completely take out the spirit in it? You broke its nose to prevent it from breathing. This doesn't just happen in statues, this also happens in representations of figures in flat surfaces without relief. Limbs and noses, and sometimes eyes, purposely removed by making holes in the surface. So the next time you see an ancient statue missing a nose, you know it was purposely broken to prevent it from being alive, to prevent it from breathing. And this is exactly where I want to get. The Latin term animus means the rational, soul, intelligence, consciousness, and mental powers. Anima means soul, living being, the mind and breath. The archaic terms of every culture to describe the soul, almost all of their linguistic roots simply mean breathing or breath. In most mythologies, the myths of creation start with the breath, either of the world itself, or the breath of the cosmos, or the breath of some deity. The breath gives life. I've spoken about this before for the Norse mythology. The term "hånd" was the Norse word for both spirit and breath. Hånd was what gave life and animated the body in the myth of Odin, Vili and Ve, or Odin, Hörnir and Lodur, when they found the first human being, a log, a piece of wood, and gave hånd, gave it breath, and so they animated the body. The cosmic being Hymir literally means screamer, unleashing breath with great violence, thus creating the cosmos and all living things. The gods are the descendants of Ymir. Hymir is the ancestor of the gods. Galdr, singing incantations, is exactly that, unleashing the hånd, one's breath, to give life to something, to project one's soul and imbue something with power, with life, with magical power. Incantations. The Old Norse peoples often said one's breath is one's soul. We have been given life through the breathing of nature, and being part of nature, we also have the same capacity to give life to a certain extent with our breath, with our singing words. Galdr, to imbue something with life and purpose. On another video I have compared hånd with the Inuit Sila. In Inuit mythology, Sila is the breath and the spirit. Sila is the breath of life, and it's also the deity with the same name which is the god of the sky and the wind, the personification of the breath of the world that gives life. Silap Inua, possessor of spirit. Sila is also the substance of which all souls are made of. It's in living tribal spiritualities, animistic in nature, that we find parallels with ancient mythological accounts that contain traces of animism. So now you might better understand the ancient animistic belief that spiritual entities could inhabit objects, just like objects with representations of the spiritual entity people wanted to have contact with. Hence, the reason why noses were purposely broken in ancient statues, to prevent it from breathing. No breath, no life, because breath is the divine spark. It's the element of nature that gives life. This is why in shamanism, particularly in cultural traditions of the Arctic regions, it is believed that when a person is born, it will only possess a soul when the baby draws its first breath. The first breath of a newborn is when the soul enters the body, in Arctic shamanic perceptions. You might be asking if animism is a religion or a culture. Well, in truth, it's both at once. In a tribal sense, the relationship with religion and culture is inseparable. The spiritualistic religion is a fundamental part of the culture of a tribe and the tribe's way of life. The actions of the member of the tribe, practically concerning everything, are highly conditioned by the spiritual beliefs and perceptions of the world. Religions, such as Christianity, for instance, have a set of dogmas to be believed, and people are restricted to those dogmas and act according to the imposing rules of the religion. While in a spiritual religion, animistic in nature, people act in conformity with the beliefs of the spiritual world and how it might affect it, and subsequently affects the tribe. The animistic perception of the world is that all life is spiritual and the spiritual world has a direct influence upon everything in life. It controls life itself. Spiritual beings are everywhere and may shape everything that happens. In a certain way, the physical world, the material reality, is submissive to the spiritual reality. So to acquire spiritual power, one must be in contact with the spiritual world. Spiritual power can only be found in the spiritual reality, out of the material world. Such spiritual knowledge is gained through the interaction with the spiritual to obtain secret knowledge and magic. Therefore, in this sense, animism is also the basis of sorcery. The hidden secrets are obtained beyond the physical. Mind that we are talking about the term soul, not as in the spiritual essence released after death, but soul in a wider sense of consciousness. This is important to understand in animism. It's not about the usual perception of a ghost-like entity, but the everlasting consciousness, a formless essence residing in everything. That's the soul, it's consciousness. Since everything has a conscious, and indeed recently scientists revealed that the cosmos itself seems to be a conscious entity, usually in cultures animistic in nature there is the belief in rebirth and reincarnation, whether the conscious will inhabit another human being or an animal or a tree or even a cosmic matter. Scientifically speaking, this notion isn't far from the truth, since absolutely everything in the universe is created from the same space dust, the same cosmic matter. We are all organisms made from the dust of stars and proto-cosmic matter, and all matter is recycled and reused once it's destroyed to create new life. And the conscious, the spirit, the true self, is what resides inside the matter. Animism is regarded as the primitive origins of religions, but primitive doesn't mean it's obsolete and nonsensical. Animism better explains the spiritual in a scientific perspective. There are clear parallels that can be created. whilst religion with the divine figures is considered the advanced process of animism, but starts to show failures towards answering questions about the natural world, the cosmos and life itself. Religion, be that polytheistic or monotheistic, is the spiritual process that comes after animism. Religion, with some basic notions of animism, it tries to create a general understanding of the spiritual that fits into the hierarchical structure of a society. Religion is created to serve the human society, and it often creates a clear boundary between humanity and the divine, while animism integrates humanity into nature and subsequently into the divine, as everything is part of the same spiritual network. For many generations in the academic world, a clear boundary between religion and animism was created. And it's still quite common to notice that separation in many academic works. Many ancient societies believed in genius loci, the spirit of a place. They believed the river contained its own spiritual entity, and a mountain, a forest, a rock, a stream, everything. The earliest gods were spirits of place. These beliefs never truly disappeared in ancient pagan societies. People worshipped the general pantheon of gods in their temples, shrines and altars, and at the same time they praised the spirits of place. In the academic field, the cult of the spirits of place is seen as low worship, so it's animism, while the cult of the gods is seen as high worship, so polytheism in its full sense, religion. But in truth, in ancient pagan societies, these two realities were not divided. This division is created in the academic field because, in general, the world is under the influence of the three main Near Eastern monotheisms: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Those religions are absolutely detached from the animistic past. Because of this factor, such religions created a collective consciousness that we all share, that makes us create this division between animism and religion. Because to such monotheisms, animism is primitive and religion is sophistication. This mindset cannot be applied to ancient pagan cultures, because within pre-Christian religions it's actually very difficult finding this division. There was a fully integrated combination of deities, fairy-like beings and ancestral worship. Even nowadays, world religions still have clear traces of animism still attached to them. Animism has never been destroyed or replaced. It has been here all the time within the persistent belief in spiritual entities such as fairies, elves, trolls, giants, familiar spirits, etc. In the pagan past, there wasn't animism and religion. Animism was part of religion. Here's something to think about. We often like to label everything within a pre-Christian culture as paganism. But it's not paganism. It's the survival aspects of animism. If a religion has in it a cult of the ancestors or a belief in fairy-like beings, it is a strong signal that that religion evolved from an earlier animistic version of itself. The gods are generally deified spirits of the land, animal spirits, celestial bodies, forces of nature, and ancestors such as kings, heroes, and other mortals of great renown, immortalized in worship. Deities are not separated from animism. They are born from it. This is why it's so important to understand animism, because the great majority of pagan deities were once human ancestors, mortal beings, people whose actions stood out, and so they continued to be praised after death. the cult of the ancestors. The gods were real and are our direct descendants. This continues to happen nowadays. I've met people that were healed by a medical doctor, and once he died, people continued to praise the medical doctor, and it became a cult within certain families, and it's carried out through the generations. Christians praise saints. Most were pagan gods that were Christianized, of course, but many saints were real people. Christians hate to admit this, and most of their real-life saints were terrible people. But animism was also this, and many of the ancient pagan gods were real people, whose deeds were phenomenal. Shamans, healers, warriors, craftsmen, seers, and so on. Here's an important question. Is animism the same thing as paganism? Animism is not synonym with paganism. Paganism is religion, and within each pagan religion there are clear cultural traditions shared by the people to whom those cultural traditions belong to. And there is the worship of deities. There are clear religious structures, and there is also traces of animism in it, which creates similarities with other cultural traditions. On the other hand, every animistic cult is different, since one tribe can revere a specific spiritual entity, while another tribe can intensify its beliefs and rituals around a type of specific element of nature. Animistic traditional practices involve both avoiding and appeasing the spirits instead of seeking them or worshipping them. Animism is more about the respect for the spirits and the consolidation with the spirits to avoid harm or their negative involvement in human affairs. But it's also about seeking certain spiritual entities to acquire knowledge and deep understanding of other realities beyond the physical sphere that can help in the material world. Animism is animism, and in it, shamanism, totemism, fetishism, the cult of the ancestors, the relationship with the spirits are spiritual realities. Paganism comes from animism and contains animistic elements, but it's already a transformation to adapt the spiritual to the human reality, while animism is the human that adapts to the spiritual. Animism is culture, religion, and a philosophy. It is a way of life and a way of thinking. Animism is the personal relationship we have with nature and with the non-human spirits that inhabit nature and are part of it. It is a relation of mutual respect and to give value to all things and all beings, visible and invisible. Within a balanced ecosystem, all life serves a purpose. Animism is the spiritual action of building an awareness and relationship with the spirits of plants, trees, animals, insects, the elements, forces and spirits of the dead. When you live within nature, you are part of it. Whether you accept it or not, you are not separate from it. It becomes extremely important to be aware of our surroundings because our survival depends on the knowledge we have and respectful treatment towards the land itself. It's not only about the survival as in the continuation of the species, but also preserving mental and physical health, maintaining a healthy balance with the surroundings and with other human beings. Animism is the original spirituality. So I rephrase what I've said earlier. Animism is not religion. Animism is the primordial foundation of every religion. We have come to a point in history that it's really hard to take it seriously, all this stuff about gods and spiritual beings of nature, elves, fairies, trolls and giants and whatnot. Certainly, it's good entertainment to read the folk tales tucked in our beds with a nice cup of tea. But we fail to see the bigger picture here, and it's not entirely our fault. These stories are the remnants of a beautiful past when we were very much entwined with nature, until certain religions completely changed our societies and led us further astray from our own nature. I see nowadays things are changing and people want to be in contact with nature once again. But still, in our minds, nature is beautiful and sometimes serves a purpose and no more than that. To really return to our roots and to understand our cultural heritage, we must first change our world perceptions and interiorize that the spiritual element we so fervently seek in human-made structures, holy books and physical representations of the divine isn't there at all. The spiritual isn't in a detached reality from our world, a world that certain religions deny and offer us salvation from it so we can achieve redemption and be accepted in some otherworldly reality. There is a hollow feeling inside most of us, a cold sense of detachment from the world around us precisely because we have been taught to detach ourselves from this world and seek a reality elsewhere, far from our physical grasp. The spiritual is here, under every root and stone, within every tree and animal, in the wind and in the earth. We must accept this world and seek the spiritual in it, not somewhere else. This is your reality. While you strive to be in contact with the spiritual in a reality far from your inner self, you will continue to be consumed by an overwhelming sense of emptiness and loneliness. You are not truly lonely. Whether you accept it or not, you are also a spiritual being belonging to a network of spiritual entities that have a real impact on the same ecosystem you live in. Your actions in this world are real and will affect you and everything else, because you are part of this world and not a detached creature that needs salvation to gain a ticket to enter a heavenly realm. Alright, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I'm sorry I had to relocate twice, but there was a great thunderstorm coming and I can't afford a new camera. Also, there are some hunters out there and I cannot afford a new life. So, thank you so much for watching, see you on the next video, and as always, tack för idag.